All right, we're going to discuss the split personality disorder between Tyler Durden and the narrator himself within Fight Club to try to figure out what's going on here. More specifically, we're hoping to connect this idea of the split personality between Tyler and the narrator to the main themes that we've been discussing, especially alienation and the repression theory that we were looking at. Both of those theories deal with, in a certain way, a fractured sense of self. Either you are problematically separated from some core element of yourself, or there are aspects of yourself that you're not fully conscious of and that are probably repressed. And so we're going to connect it to those two theories and then turn to some specific passages. First in the later chapters, in chapter 22, where the narrator is figuring out what this all means, and then wind it back to the early chapters to see how the clues were there all along. Just without realizing it, we were kind of tricked throughout the entire novel. One of the really fun things about the novel, as well as the movie, is that once you know the twist that Tyler and the narrator are the same person, it makes going back and rereading the book with that knowledge in mind really fun. You pick up on so many clues that you wouldn't have been conscious of the first time. So, with that, let's head on over to OneNote to take a look at how this connects to our two theories. So, split personality. These are, kind of oversimplified versions of the two theories that we've been talking about: alienation on the left, repression theory on the right. Let's take a look at how this all plays out. So in my mind, right, if alienation was about the problematic separation between yourself and some deeper, more authentic essence, and we discuss the implications of that within a world where our labor does not belong to us, where the products that we buy are disconnected from our communities and from our own labor, so on and so forth, we can see here that on the left-hand side, the narrator represents that fractured self that is alienated from the essence, right? The self that is trapped, lifeless, emotionless. It seems to have no deeper meaning. He is weak. He is dependent on things like consumerism and the support groups. And most importantly, he feels inauthentic. And then on the right, if we were to start charting out, all right, what are the key attributes of Tyler, we can see right away that Tyler embodies the opposite attributes. Tyler is free. Tyler is fulfilled. Tyler seems self-actualized. He seems to be spouting ideology that is true to his own life. He is courageous. He is strong. He is independent. And he is authentic. And so that could be one way of understanding it. I think in this view, what the split personality would then be dramatizing is the fact that the narrator on the left feels completely unable to connect with those more authentic aspects of himself. He can't integrate the Tyler Durden personality just into his regular personality because everything that he has learned and internalized from the society is that his sense of self cannot make room for those things. On the right here, if we were to look at repression theory, if you remember, the key idea here is that society's rules, morals, demands, limitations end up repressing core primal instincts, forbidden impulses, aggressive energy, immoral urges, those more animalistic aspects of ourself that are deeper in the unconscious have been repressed by society. If we look at the narrator, right, the narrator obviously is a deeply and profoundly repressed individual. He is obedient, he is submissive, he has no sexuality. Early on, if you remember, he says that he has replaced pornography with the IKEA furniture catalog. He's non-confrontational. So in many ways, I think all of those aspects of the unconscious are deeply and profoundly repressed by the narrator. Moreover, if we then contrast it with Tyler, we can see that Tyler is the exact opposite. He has a blatant disregard for society's rules and morals. He embraces violence willingly. He is active sexually in terms of his relationship with Marla. And so we can see here that Tyler represents perhaps the unleashing of these repressed forces. And once again, the fact that the narrator himself doesn't feel like he can totally do this, that he has to create an alter ego without even being conscious of it, I think just is dramatizing how severe this repression truly is. The narrator's sense of self in both of these theories is so fractured that the only way that he feels that he can get in touch with these aspects that he doesn't feel that his own sense of self has room for is by creating a totally separate alter ego that he is not even conscious of as being just him at the end of the day. So hopefully you can see that everything we've been discussing so far in this unit has actually set up the idea of a split personality very well, because all these theories are about fractured senses of self, or a sense of self that where your psyche is divided against itself. And you can see that's exactly what's going on with the Tyler-Narrator dynamic. So with that, let's go into chapter 22 so we can start to take a look at what's going on here. So, chapter 22, this is right after the narrator finds out that Tyler is indeed him. And right after that reveal at the end of chapter 21, you can see beginning of chapter 22, it opens up with a return to insomnia, which is something the narrator has been struggling with throughout the entirety of the novel. It says, "All night long, your thoughts are on the air. Am I sleeping? Have I slept at all? This is the insomnia. Try to relax a little more with every breath out, but your heart's still racing and your thoughts tornado in your head. Nothing works, not guided meditation." So, okay, you can see here that it's connecting this idea of insomnia, this idea of disorientation or a sense of lifelessness or emotionlessness, an inability to get rest, the anxiety or neuroses that is underlying the narrator's life is coming back here. And we have a deeper appreciation now for the way in which Tyler is responsible for that. If we go to page 167, you can see here, Tyler begins explaining what's going on. And so, right down here, it says, "I said that if you talked about me behind my back, you would never see me again." Tyler said, "We're not two separate men. Long story short, when you're awake, you have control, and you can call yourself anything you want. But the second you fall asleep, I take over, and you become Tyler Durden." "But we fought," I say. "That night we invented Fight Club." Now watch this next line, is really important. "You weren't really fighting me," Tyler says. "You said so yourself. You were fighting everything you hate in your life. But I can see you. You're asleep." So, okay, on a figurative level, obviously, being asleep could be figuratively associated with a loss of understanding, a loss of comprehension. Having consciousness is a prerequisite to both of those things. And moreover, right, on the reverse side, if somebody says that they are finally awake on a figurative level, it is typically associated with those ideas of understanding and comprehension for the same reasons. So the narrator has been figuratively asleep in terms of realizing that he is the same person as Tyler. Obviously, on a literal level, it works out, because when he is technically asleep, i.e. in his insomnia state, that is when Tyler can take over. The other really important thing to analyze here is the idea that the narrator was not really fighting Tyler Durden. If you remember, the first time we read the scene in which Tyler and the narrator, quote-unquote, fight, when they start Fight Club, Tyler says, "I want you to punch me as hard as you can." You were to imagine that these are two separate people fighting, right? Working out some of those inner aggressive impulses. In reality, now we have a better understanding. What was literally going on was the narrator was just beating himself up. Now, on a figurative level, right, he is hurting himself, he is beating himself up. We can see here that he is probably responding to those aspects of himself that he deeply and profoundly hates. The things on the left over here, right? The trapped, lifeless, emotionless sense of self that is dependent and inauthentic, or the deeply repressed self. Either way, he is finding a way to create an alter ego so that he can punish that aspect of himself that he deeply and profoundly hates. Let's keep going. "But you're renting a house. You held a job, 2 jobs. Tyler says, "Order your canceled checks from the bank. I rented the house in your name. I think you'll find the handwriting on the checks matches the notes you've been typing for me." "Tyler's been spending my money. It's no wonder I'm always overdrawn." "And the jobs, well, why do you think you're so tired? Geez, it's not insomnia. As soon as you fall asleep, I take over and go to work or Fight Club or whatever. You're lucky I didn't get a job as a snake handler." I say, "But what about Marla?" "Marla loves you." "Marla loves you." "Marla doesn't know the difference between you and me. You gave her a fake name the night you met. You never gave your real name at a support group, you inauthentic shit. Since I saved her life, Marla thinks your name is Tyler Durden." So you can see a number of things that are going on here. First, we understand why the narrator is always so tired. When he thinks he's asleep, it's really just Tyler taking over. And second, in terms of this, you can see how this is connecting to those core themes of inauthenticity, right? He's never able to give his real name. He always gives fake names. And Tyler even straight out says it. You are inauthentic. And I think the Tyler Durden personality is just more evidence of this. He cannot create an authentic existence himself, so he needs to create this alter ego. Let's go back now and take a look at what's going on in the early chapters. So if we go to chapter 3, you can see here, this on page 25, how all the clues were there all along. And if you remember, chapter 1 and 2 just kind of introduce the narrator's problems. He's going to the support groups. He has insomnia, so on and so forth. Chapter 3 is when we're first introduced to Tyler Durden. I guess chronologically. Of course, you see him in the opening scene with a gun pointed at his mouth, but this is the first time chronologically that we're meeting Tyler. And throughout this chapter, the narrator is experiencing extreme disorientation by waking up at various airports at the behest of his boss to go to these areas for his job. Not only does that represent a disorientation of space, right? He is waking up in new places all the time, but also, as the chapter makes clear, time, as he's switching time zones. And so this disorientation of space and time is going to be important. While this disorientation is going on one side, on the other side, he's introducing Tyler Durden's night job working as a movie projectionist. Now we realize that is the narrator's night job himself, and we can better appreciate now the technique of what's going on here. And Tyler's actually going to outright say it in terms of the idea of a changeover in a movie projector, which is exactly what's going on within the novel. So let's take a look. Page 25. You wake up at Air Harbor International. Every takeoff and landing, when the plane banked too much to one side, I prayed for a crash. That moment cures my insomnia with narcolepsy when we might die helpless and packed human tobacco in the fuselage. This is how I met Tyler Durden. You wake up at O'Hare, you wake up at LaGuardia, you wake up at Logan. So notice, guys, he is going to describe literally how he meets Tyler, but we can better appreciate the causal connection between what's going on here, right? As the narrator is experiencing a sense of disorientation, as well as these profound feelings of resentment and self-hatred and self-loathing, this is what creates Tyler Durden. This is how I met Tyler Durden. Tyler worked part-time as a movie projectionist. Because of his nature, Tyler could only work night jobs. If a projectionist called in sick, the union called Tyler. Some people are night people. Some people are day people. I could only work a day job. So notice, guys, right there we're getting more evidence. Tyler can only work night jobs because that's when the narrator loses control of his consciousness in his insomnia states. The narrator only works day jobs because that's when he's in control. You wake up at Dulles. Life insurance pays off triple if you die on a business trip. I prayed for wind shear effect. I prayed for pelicans sucked into the turbines and loose bolts and ice on the wings. On takeoff, as the plane pushed down the runway and the flaps tilted up, with our seat in their full upright position and our tray table stowed and all personal carry-on baggage in the overhead compartment, as the end of the runway ran up to meet us with our smoking materials extinguished, I prayed for a crash. You wake up at Love Field. So notice, guys, again, all of that evidence of the narrator praying for the crash is profoundly depressing evidence of the extent of the narrator's self-hatred. The reason he cannot integrate those aspects of the Tyler Durden personality is because his own understanding of himself is so terrible that he cannot possibly think of good things coming from that self. In a projection booth, Tyler did changeovers if the theater was old enough. With changeovers, you have 2 projectors in the booth and 1 projector is running. So guys, imagine applying this to the 2 projectors being Tyler Durden personality and the narrator personality. I know this because Tyler knows this. Again, good evidence. Now we can read this with the knowledge that the reason that they share so much knowledge is not because they're friends, but because they quite literally are the same person. Second projector is set up with the next reel of film. Most movies are 6 or 7 small reels of film played in a certain order. Newer theaters, they splice all the reels together into a 1 5-foot reel. This way, you don't have to run 2 projectors and do changeovers. Switch back and forth, reel 1, switch, reel 2 on the other projector, switch, reel 3 on the first projector, switch. You wake up at SeaTac. So hopefully you are seeing this switching that is going on, which is the key idea of a changeover, is exactly what's going on with the narrator and Tyler Durden. Let's keep going. If you flip over to page 27, you can see more good evidence of this Tyler-Narrator dynamic. Tyler's a banquet waiter, waiting tables at a hotel downtown, and Tyler's a projectionist with the Projector Operators Union. I don't know how long Tyler had been working on all those nights I couldn't sleep. The old theaters that run a movie with 2 projectors, a projectionist has to stand there to change projectors at the exact second, so the audience never sees the break when one reel starts and one reel ran out. You have to look for the white dots in the top right-hand corner of the screen. This is the warning. Watch the movie and you'll see the 2 dots at the end of the reel. Cigarette burns, they're called in the business. Okay, so you can see here again, hopefully you're picking up on all these clues that were there all along, right? Obviously, Tyler was working on all the nights he couldn't sleep because that's literally how their personality works. It is through the severe insomnia and the self-hatred and self-loathing that Tyler is eventually created. So one important thing, right? Don't confuse it. Tyler is not the root cause of the insomnia. Tyler is the byproduct of all those things that are leading to the insomnia within his life. That's the only time Tyler emerges, is once it becomes so bad that he needs something like Tyler to help make sense of his life. Also, if you watch the film version, it actually incorporates these cigarette burns, these 2 dots in the upper right-hand corner throughout the film, and splices in little images of Tyler. Hopefully you remember that when we were watching some clips in class, but it's a really fun way on a meta level to engage with the techniques of film, the cinematography, to incorporate this very idea of a changeover not being as smooth as we think. Let's keep going. Also, the other thing to connect cigarette burns, if you remember Marla Singer, as she is quote-unquote trying to hit bottom, which is a goal also of the narrator through following Tyler Durden. Marla continually puts cigarettes out on her arm and gets cigarette burns. So we're getting some connections there as well. Let's keep going. Page 28. Again, just more description of this. The dark is hot from the bulbs inside the projectors, and the alarm is ringing. Stand there between the 2 projectors with a lever in each hand and watch the corner of the screen. The second dot flashes. Count to 5. Switch one shutter close. At the same time, open the other shutter. Changeover. The movie goes on. Nobody in the audience has any idea. And so hopefully you appreciate the way in which we are the audience, and the changeover has been going on right in front of us, and we have had no idea of what's going on there. And all of this sense of disorientation culminates in one of the final lines of the chapter on page 33, where the narrator, after experiencing just waking up in different places at different times, not at his own will, but at the behest of a boss, right? Not owning his own labor, but doing things for others, ends up saying, if I could wake up in a different place at a different time, could I wake up as a different person? So you can see, I think this sense of disorientation applies to his very understanding of himself. He has no self that he can really base anything on, because all he knows about himself is that he hates his life and he hates his sense of self. So that's why he creates Tyler. All right, let's go to new chapter now. So if we go over to chapter 15, we can see some more evidence. Again, I'm not going over every single example of the Tyler-Narrator split, but hopefully you can get a good sense of kind of what's going on here. So in chapter 15, this is where the narrator and Tyler both quit their jobs by going up to their bosses and telling them that they are going to quit but remain on payroll. Otherwise, they will release all the terrible information of the things that they have been doing at their jobs. And a great line, like right as Tyler's approaching this head honcho boss, sign right here says, under and behind and inside everything the man took for granted, something horrible had been growing. So that's a great way to articulate kind of what's going on here, right? Under and behind and inside everything within this system or this society or the narrator's life, something horrible had been growing. And that is the Tyler Durden personality. That is the violent rejection of the system, so on and so forth. Nothing is static. Everything is falling apart. I know this because Tyler knows this. All right, so some more good evidence here. If you go over to page 114, you can see, again, more clues. At the top of the page, it says Tyler and I were looking more and more like identical twins. Both of us had punched out cheekbones, and our skin had lost its memory and forgot where to slide back to where after we were hit. And then at the bottom of the page, it says Tyler's words coming out of my mouth, and I used to be such a nice person. So you can see all of this, again, they not only are spewing the exact same words, they quite literally look like identical twins. And so we are saying that is because they are identical. Go over 2 pages to 116, and you can see the moment where the narrator is about to start beating himself up to stage it as if the boss had been abusing him. Look at these lines. So this is 116. It says, and without flinching, still looking at the manager, I roundhoused the fist at the centrifugal force end of my arm and slammed fresh blood out of the cracked scabs in my nose. For no reason at all, I remember the night Tyler and I had our first fight. I want you to hit me as hard as you can. This isn't such a hard punch. I punch myself again. It just looks good, all the blood, but I throw myself back against the wall to make a terrible noise and break the painting that hangs there. So now we can appreciate there is a reason why he remembers the night that Tyler and him had their first fight, and it's because on a literal level, all that was going on there was the narrator was beating himself up, which is the exact same thing that's going on here. So again, guys, that evidence was there all along. Now let's go back to the later chapters to kind of appreciate what's going on. And we'll see this in chapter 23 in terms of the narrator's interaction with Marla. They go to Denny's. And all right, this is page 172. I take out my wallet and show Marla the driver's license with my real name. Notice it never actually tells us what the narrator's real name is, right? Whatever his authentic identity is remains a mystery to us. Not Tyler Durden. But everybody knows you're Tyler Durden, Marla says. Everybody but me. Nobody at work calls me Tyler Durden. My boss calls me by my real name. My parents know who I really am. So why, Marla asks, are you Tyler Durden to some people but not to everybody? The first time I met Tyler, I was asleep. Again, good figurative analysis to do with asleep. I was tired and crazy and rushed, and every time I boarded a plane, I wanted the plane to crash. I envied people dying of cancer. I hated my life. I was tired and bored with my job and my furniture, and I couldn't see any way to change things. Only end them. I felt trapped. I was too complete. I was too perfect. I wanted a way out of my tiny life. Single-serving butter and cramped airline seat role in the world. Swedish furniture. Clever art. I took a vacation. I fell asleep on the beach, and when I woke up there was Tyler Durden, naked and sweating, gritty with sand, his hair wet and stringy, hanging in his face. So not only does this passage brilliantly describe all those ideas that we've been discussing throughout this lecture, of the narrator feeling so trapped and unable to escape his life that he needed to create Tyler Durden as a way out. Obviously, that is well described. Also, notice, I think the nudity of Tyler is important on a figurative level, right? Nudity is about exposure or vulnerability, but I think you could also argue there's an authenticity there. Tyler is not masking himself in any way. He is revealing the most authentic expression of himself, not masked by any of society's clothes, so on and so forth. And so Tyler represents the aspects that the narrator wishes he could embody. Let's keep going. Tyler was pulling driftwood logs out of the surf and dragging them up the beach. What Tyler had created was the shadow of a giant hand, and Tyler was sitting in the palm of a perfection he had made himself. And a moment was the most you could ever expect from perfection. Maybe I never really woke up on that beach. Maybe all this started when I peed on the Blarney Stone. When I fall asleep, I don't really sleep. At the other tables in the Planet Denny's, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys with black cheekbones or folded down noses smiling at me. No, Marla says, you don't sleep. Tyler Durden is a separate personality I've created, and now he's threatening to take over my real life. Just like Tony Perkins' mother's in Psycho, Marla says. This is so cool. Everybody has their little quirks. One time I dated a guy who couldn't get enough body piercings. My point being, I say, I fall asleep and Tyler's running off with my body and punched out face to commit some crime. The next morning I wake up bone tired and beat up, and I'm sure I haven't slept at all. The next night I'd go to bed earlier. That next night Tyler would be in charge a little longer. Every night that I go to bed earlier and earlier, Tyler will be in charge longer and longer. But you are Tyler, Marla says. No, I'm not. I love everything about Tyler Durden. His courage and his smarts, his nerve. Tyler is funny and charming and forceful and independent, and men look up to him and expect him to change their world. Tyler is capable and free, and I am not. I'm not Tyler Durden. So, okay, again, I think this passage brilliantly captures the ways in which Tyler Durden embodies all the attributes that the narrator wishes he had. A couple questions to end on now. Right? It seems as if the Tyler part of his personality is taking over more and more. Clearly, there's an underlying unconscious desire for the narrator to be able to embody what Tyler Durden represents. The question is, would it be bad for the narrator to fully embody those attributes of Tyler Durden? Why or why not? Does Tyler Durden taking over his personality represent a problematic thing? Or in fact, is that something that the narrator should embrace? Is that an aspect of himself that he should willingly accept given all the problems with his own sense of self that he has? And second, the final thing that we have to start to figure out is whether the concrete solutions to the problems that Tyler has created, Fight Club and Project Mayhem, are indeed effective in terms of solving the narrator's underlying issues. And so for that question, you should think through, what are the advantages of Fight Club, right? What things does Fight Club do well? And do you have any hesitations? And if so, what are they and why? What are the issues with Fight Club and Project Mayhem that you would bring up in terms of them not being effective solutions? So those are the two questions, right? One, should the narrator just willingly accept the Tyler Durden personality? Why or why not? And second, are Fight Club and Project Mayhem the solutions to the narrator's underlying problems? Those are the questions to consider. One other fun connection, if any of you have seen the movie Split, I think that does a good job. If you're kind of curious about what is a split personality, that film features a protagonist who has something like 26 or 27 split personalities. So a really crazy movie if you want to watch that to get more insight into this type of disorder. Hopefully you all found this useful. Again, if you have more questions about any of this, feel free to let me know. And I'll check in with you all tomorrow.